We're actually starting a new series this morning. Isn't that exciting? Very exciting. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So last week, Thomas referenced a film called Chocolat. This week, I've brought the game a bit further up, and I'm referencing a film from Good Will Hunting. You're welcome. Mark 1, Thomas no. No better way to start a new series and keep track of the score. But this week we're looking at Devoted, a series on what does it mean to be devoted. If you're new to Christianity, if you're still in the margins, or if you don't have a faith, that might sound a bit weird, of being devoted to something which is a bit abstract. What does that mean for me? But that's what we're going to unpack over the next 6 weeks. So the first slide I want to show you is from a film called Good Will Hunting. And spoiler alert, Good Will Hunting is all about a man called Will who is very blessed and gifted with mathematics. But he's been brought up in a bit of an unfair life, a bit rough, and Will has not seen the potential he has got. And his friend Chucky is trying to distill in him that he has potential. And this is what Chucky says to Will. Every day I come by your house and I pick you up and we go out. We have a few drinks, we have a few laughs, and it's great. But you know what the best part of my day is? For about 10 seconds, from when I pull up to the curb and when I get to your door. Because I think maybe I'll get up there and I'll knock on the door and you won't be there. No goodbye, no see you later, no nothing. You just left. I don't know much, but I know that. And what Chucky's trying to communicate there is he really hopes that one day Will wakes up in the morning and sees the potential that he has to not stay in the same place, but to move on and to get on with the potential that he's been given. And I think for us, often we might look ourselves in the mirror and think, oh, I'll just crack on every day. But actually what I want to start this new series with is when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, do you actually see the God-given potential that God's given you? And the only way you're going to find out is if you are devoted to the Lord, that you press in and you lean in a new way, that you might be able to see God in a different way. Okay? So we're going to look at a character called Joseph. Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, and it's in Luke 23. So if we could get the passage up, because I don't have a Bible with me. So, now there was a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to their decision and action. He came from the Judean town of Arimathea, and he himself was waiting for the kingdom of God. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down and wrapped it in linen and cloth and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one in which no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The woman who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. Are we doing okay? Do I need to move to the middle? Okay. Further back. There we go. Eh? Oh yeah, Thomas has learned. Okay. So, in this part of the story, it's that in-between stage of the exciting part in a film where the crucifixions happen, Jesus died, but we don't know what's going to happen next. It's about what happens in the next episode. And Joseph is a man who is waiting for the kingdom, it says. He is someone who is a disciple of Jesus, an apprentice of him. He has been with him for the past 3 years. And yet, it comes to the point in his life where his master has been crucified in front of his eyes, and he has not given up. In that point of despair, there's no instructions of necessarily what's coming next. He's literally in this in-between of waiting. Oh, this is not great. So he's in this point of in-between and waiting. And I don't know what you're like in that stage of there's no instructions, but you just have to wait. Joseph is very much at that stage, but he is choosing to submit himself to the Lord. waiting for the kingdom. He's believing in something better than what is currently there. And I don't know what you're like when things look a bit uncertain or if you don't feel close to God. Well, good news is that there's a famous pastor called Brennan Manning. And he, every year in his ministry, he would go on this retreat, which is basically a time where you would go away and you'd spend time with God. And you would choose to, I suppose, remove yourself away from your current context so that you could be really intentional to listen to God. And Brennan says this in his book: outside, it's dark and below zero. That pretty well describes where I'm at inside. The opening night of an 8-day retreat, and I'm filled with a sense of uneasiness, restlessness, and even dread. Bone weary and lonely. I can't connect two thoughts about God. Have abandoned any attempt at prayer. It seems too artificial. The words spoken to God are forced and ring hollow in my empty soul. There is no joy in being in his presence. An oppressive but vague feeling of guilt stirs within me. Somehow or other, I've failed him. Maybe pride and vanity have blinded me. Maybe insensitivity to pain has hardened my heart. Is my life a disappointment to you, God? Are you grieved by the shallowness of my soul, God? Whatever, I've lost you through my own fault, and I'm powerless to undo it. That's coming from a pastor. He can't connect two thoughts. He can't convey any coherent sentence or word or prayer to the man that he's working for, essentially. But in this chapel where Brennan is choosing to be with God, because he knows if he's anywhere else, he's probably going to be distracted. He says he spent 13 hours in that chapel until it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, in that place of just staring empty in this church, empty church. And he says throughout that whole time that he was there, the only thing that he got away from God was this sentence from the Lord, which says, live in the tenderness of wisdom. Imagine that if you were there for 13 hours trying to seek God in a place where you're just feeling bone dry and empty. Live in the tenderness of wisdom. Brennan says that tenderness was all that he needed, because that tenderness he describes was to know that he was liked, to know that he was loved, to know that he was listened to. But what I love about this account of Brennan is that it raises two questions for me. Either on one side it says, God, where are you in this emptiness? Where are you when I can't hear you? Or it gives me the reassurance that regardless of how I'm feeling, and regardless of whether I get a warm and fuzzy feeling, actually, God, you're listening to me. There's two sides that you could look at this. And it's really important that as we think about what it means to be devoted, actually, it's not about feeling warm and fuzzy. Brennan has exemplified this already in a sense that it's not about the great sense of welcome or whatever it is, but we can be reassured that whatever temperature we're feeling at with God, actually, he's with us in that period of silence. Being devoted to God is not about feeling warm and fuzzy, but it's about being hungry, expectant, and patient that God is going to do something. A bit like Joseph, waiting for the kingdom when his master has been killed. He knows there's something coming around the corner. He may not feel it. He may not feel amazing at that point, but he's trusting and he's got faith. And devoted is when you're self-sacrificial. That's what the Hebrew meaning of devoted is. It's when you choose to put something above yourself more than your own needs. And in that place of discipleship, being devoted, it can often be quite lonely. But discipleship is not about being static. It says later on in the passage that the women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb. They followed. It's a verb. It's a doing thing. You can't be still and follow something. You've got to be moving. You're going to chase after something. You're behind someone because you're intentional to seek after in that pursuit. And in that place of discipleship, I wonder what that feels like for you. Do you remain static Or do you continue to follow even though you don't have the warm, fuzzy feeling? We can learn a lot over the last couple of years, and maybe how it relates to Joseph and what he was like in those 3 days of the crucifixion and what was going to come, the resurrection. The past 2 years of lockdown has meant that we've been removed from our community. We're forced to our own company or to those in our own household, forced to only 1 dose of exercise a day. It can feel like you were maybe in that place as well, feeling empty, unsure. God, what's coming around the corner? God, where are you? God, I can't feel you. I'm not in my church building. I'm not in my small group. I'm not used to the same examples of faith that I was once taught and exposed to. God, where are you in this? Lord, I need you. Where are you? You haven't given me anything else. And John Mark Comer, who is a bit of a guru for the 20s and 30s in the Christian faith, he was a pastor in Portland for many years. But he talks about deconstruction, and deconstruction is this huge issue going on in the Christian faith and discipleship right now, where particularly the 20s and 30s in this generation are beginning to take a step back from the Christian faith and beginning to look at the Christian faith in a different way. And so he breaks this deconstruction into 3 stages. The first one is construction, where essentially your life is a blank canvas. The way that you've been brought up, from your childhood to your early adolescence, is essentially you've got this template and exposure of life. And he says that is essentially how you will make your decisions. But then he says the second stage is the deconstruction phase, is when you hit a stage in your life where you have the maturity and the autonomy to start making your own decisions. And you start to think about how you would see life. And that, I suppose, that stage or that phase of life that you're in means that in that autonomy and that independence that you have to begin to critique and look at things in a different way can often be unhelpful, because it means that we do that by ourselves. So much skepticism can be good to some extent in that it forces us to think for ourselves what we want. But to the extent it can be detrimental in that it decreases our faith, because it means we've got to know all the answers. And Comer describes this to be an isolating place. And there was a man called Thomas Jefferson. For those who want a bit of a history lesson, he was president in the US in around the 17th, 18th century. And Jefferson was famously known for his perspective on the Bible. Jefferson took the Bible and he looked at the Gospels again. And in his presidency, he was trying to encourage his society to rethink and remake society and challenging everything that came. So if you were once taught something, why take that for granted? Challenge that. Look at that again. Why does it have to be that way? That can be healthy to some extent. But again, going back to this deconstruction, that can be detrimental. And Jefferson went to the extreme that he went through all 4 accounts of the gospel and looked at it and physically cut out parts of the Bible of the supernatural, the miraculous, and any signs of Jesus being divine. In other words, Jesus being who he really was, the Son of God. He says, this is far too difficult for me to understand. I've got to cut this out and remove it. And so I'm going to have purely a character of Jesus who is a good, moral guy. That's the Jesus I want to believe in. I don't know about you, but Joseph was someone who was going through this pain by himself, picking up your master's dead body and trying to bandage him up and putting him in a tomb. How much lower could you get in a place of isolation than that? John Mark Comer says, don't walk through modern skepticism alone. There's an oasis waiting for you. When you're sitting there by yourself and you think, Lord, where are you? I can't feel you. In that place of devotion, lean in and look around you. And a bit like the woman from Galilee, bring them with you. Do not go through life by yourself, thinking that this is it. But actually, more likely there's going to be others that will think alike with you. And it's important that as disciples and as followers of Jesus that we need to bring other people with us. In that place of pursuing and leaning in, there's so much that we can learn and grab from one another. And I think the women from Galilee were a huge blessing to Joseph in that place. a few years ago, I was in a place of discernment, which essentially is just a Christianese word for saying I was trying to make a life decision. And I was stressed. I was trying to think about, Lord, what do I do next? And I was really praying to God, and I was in a place of ministry back then as well. So I thought, a bit like Brennan, this should be easy, but it wasn't. And I had a few options on the table. I didn't know whether to move city. I didn't know where to stay where I was. I didn't know whether to stay in that job in that city or whether to take a different job. There were so many different factors and variables to consider. But in that place of stress for about a month, I just had sleepless nights. And of course, when you can't sleep and you don't have a rest, you're really struggling because you're not thinking properly. And so in that place, a bit like Joseph and the woman from Galilee, I decided to seek other people to help me. So there was this couple from church who led prayer ministry. They ran this prayer ministry called Sozo. And I said to them, can you help me with this? I really need God's voice in my life in this season. Help me to do this. I was a bit like Brennan, couldn't really hear the Lord's voice in my life then. And I went round to their place, had a lovely meal, and then they took me through this prayer exercise. And it was filled with lots of profound images and words where I really felt the Lord was really guiding me through this. But one of the most profound ones that stood out to me the most was at the end of this prayer exercise. I really felt Jesus was giving me a black pouch. And I said to Jesus in that place, I was about to open it. I said, can I open it? He says, no, not now. I said, okay, that's a bit random. Okay, a black pouch. It felt like something like Pirates of the Caribbean. I was like, what's this? So I left that place. I left somewhat encouraged, a little bit warm and fuzzy. I thought, okay, we're on the right page here. But the next morning it was my last week in that job at ministry. And it was my last staff meeting. And halfway through the staff meeting, I get this knock on the door. And there's a bit of whispering at the doors when the staff member sees it. And everyone's like trying to pay attention to the staff meeting, but really everyone's looking at the staff door being like, who's the random person? And it was a woman called Margaret. And Margaret was someone who used to come along to the food bank to just volunteer. She didn't go to the church, but she just used to help out. And then the staff member said, Mark, it's for you. I thought, oh dear, I'm in trouble. What have I done? Walked to the door, and Margaret's there. And there she gives me face mask. There she gives me a black pouch. And I jaw dropped. And she said, Mark, I came here this morning because I felt really prompted by the Lord to give you a black pouch. I want you to open it. It wasn't as difficult at the time. It was much easier. And it was the cross, a wooden cross. That's all I had. That was the image that Jesus gave me. And it's a bit like Joseph at this point in the story. He doesn't know a lot. He doesn't know what's around the corner. He doesn't know what this next season of life is going to look like for him. His master slain on a wooden tree. But Jesus was coming back to life. And that was the waiting for the kingdom that Joseph had. In a season of not knowing, in a season where he didn't know what was coming around the corner, Joseph knew that something was coming for the better. And I don't know how you relate to that story. There are some things in life where we just don't understand everything that comes at us. There's periods in our life where being devoted to God, being devoted to a Christian faith, doesn't make any sense. But in that place, we have to be like Joseph and think, there are some things in life that I can fall back upon, and the cross is my backstump. That is the promise. I know that Jesus has died on the cross for me. I don't know a lot, but that's what I do know. If I hadn't pressed into God and leaned into God in that moment, it would have been very easy for me to stay in that confusion, and a bit like that place of deconstruction, be confused, be isolated, and begin to A bit like Jefferson as well, pick certain parts which made sense to me and which was convenient to me. But being devoted to God isn't about picking the parts of the Bible or parts of the faith that make sense to us and make us feel warm and fuzzy. Being devoted to God is about pushing in and leaning in to a season where it doesn't make sense, but it says, hey, God, I don't know everything, but I'm ready to write this new story with you. Joseph played such a pivotal role in one of the greatest stories in humanity, where the Son of God died and came back to life. There's no other story that competes with that on planet Earth. Joseph chose to play that role, and so can we. Yes, the Bible finishes at Revelation, but God's story never finishes there. Yes, it's a closed book, that's the Bible done, but God's narrative is ever going. And in this season where we've come out of lockdown and there's a pandemic, there's something around the corner for each one of us. But the question is whether you're going to be devoted. And that is a singular, independent decision that you have to make. But what I want to encourage you with is that it cannot just be based on how you feel. It's got to be based on how you know the Lord. Knowing certain truths, knowing certain promises, that he's died for you. You were bought at a price. That's a crazy truth. So I want to encourage us to think about that. Jesus has died for you, and he's inviting you to participate in this great narrative. The question is, are you going to lean in, or are you going to opt out and sit on the fence? And that's the decision to make. So let me just pray, and we'll finish there.